Hi, this is Andy Kaytes, and I'm here with Dr. Rawlings, Stephen Rawlings from San Diego, University of California, San Diego. He is an infectious disease fellow, and we're going to find out a little bit about him and how he got to where you are now and where you think you might end up going. So welcome, welcome.
Thank you.
This is a nice rainy day in Seattle. It's been sunny for so long.
They
and now
say it never rains in Seattle.
Exactly, exactly. So anyway, so I'm really interested, we've only recently met, and I'm really interested in your story and how you got to be A, interested in medicine, and B, how you got interested or funneled into the direction you are with infectious disease.
Well, it's sometimes hard to reflect and know exactly where everything turned at different points, but I know as early as high school I probably wanted to do medicine. I have two computer engineers for parents, so I think there was a little while that everyone thought I was going to do computer engineering, but my mom says I said I wanted to do medicine really early. So from high school and sort of pre-med type courses in college, I could tell that I liked it, and they said to me in college, hey, you should do some research to sort of make your application look better for med school. And I started working in the lab of David Cochran at Tufts University, and he was always so happy to be doing research and just so excited to look at data and results. And I remember sort of saying, I think I want to mix research and medicine. I want to do more than just practice medicine. Is there something I can do in research too? And somewhere someone said, well, there's this thing too where you can get a PhD and an MD. And I said, oh, that sounds like just what I want to do. And so sort of just, I wouldn't say stumbling, but it felt a little bit like I stumbled into combining research and medicine. And so I ended up getting accepted into that program. These are programs that are designed to sort of combine and make the most out of training for a PhD and training for an MD. I ended up at NYU and joined a lab that was looking at the immune system. And I sort of, for a while, knew I was interested in the immune system. I had sort of a couple of reasons there. One was before I was even born, a family member had died of leukemia, and so I sort of grew up knowing that the immune system was maybe something to be feared and powerful, and I also sort of suffered with like food allergies as a kid, so I was sort of like, okay, this immune system seems really whack, like what's going on? And I went into a lab that was both investigating regulatory T cells, so sort of maybe the cells that could help prevent autoimmunity, allergies, and the researcher Jerry Unematz was interested in HIV and had a history of HIV. And so this is sort of an example of those serendipitous things that happen in medicine or research in general. The project I got assigned was HIV, and somebody who joined the lab at the same time as me, she got the project that was sort of more allergy. But I loved it. I had had an interest in HIV research even before that too, but I didn't know which direction I was going to go, like I said. And the HIV field is just so interesting and large and full of brainy, intelligent, fun to hang around people that I just kind of got swept up into it and have kept going with it.
And here you are with 4,000 of these people at the CROI.
Right. And everyone,
conference.
It's so fun being part of the discussions, and sometimes it can get into nitty gritty and you don't even understand the terms necessarily, or something that somebody's using and you realize, okay, there's a lot more I need to know.
Well, but just to stop you, you're actually working in cure research as well, and there are terms that are getting invented seemingly every day. It's just a new thing nobody has a name for, and somebody comes up with one.
I remember in either the introduction or the epilogue of my thesis for my PhD, I said when I started this research, we didn't have the terms the Mississippi baby or a post-treatment controller, because it was true. I started around 2009, and I wrote my thesis in 2013, and in those 4 years, the Berlin patient had just been announced right before I started, but the Mississippi baby was announced after. The post-treatment controller sort of concept was out, and it was something that, was inspiring. I remember also writing, I sort of felt, at least in 2009, that the word cure was a bit of a four-letter word in the bad sense, that we weren't supposed to use it, it wasn't going to happen. And then,
why is that?
I don't know. I guess maybe it's also just a literary piece to contrast, but I felt like at the time we were focusing on just get good drugs, and vaccines don't seem to be working, and we're just going to try to treat as well as we can and figure out how to reduce transmission, which is still now something we talk about. But maybe there was a sense I felt as almost an outsider becoming an insider looking in that we weren't supposed to talk about cure. And by the end of that, which now is 5 years ago, we were talking about it, and we talk about it even more now, and that's something that's really exciting.
And now it's become a very controversial term.
Yes.
Do we stick with cure? Do we go with remission? Do we
Functional
come up with
cure?
Yeah, eradicating cure.
Right.
And I guess the jury's still out on that, and it's probably
is.
going to be for quite some time. And then you landed at UCSD, University of California, San Diego. What brought you there?
I wanted a bit of a change. I was always an East Coast person, so I sort of, for residency searching, set my eyes on the West Coast as basically as plain as I could say it. I knew that there was really exciting HIV research going on there and a really great infectious disease program, which I had at some point also in that MD PhD determined I wanted to be an infectious disease doctor, but it sort of seemed the right fit, and I've been delighted ever since to be in San Diego.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
That's excellent. And you're part of a pretty cool team. There's a study called The Last Gift. And The Last Gift is really, really unique in the world of HIV research anyway. There's been some similar studies in cancer. But what can you tell us about that and how that feels to be involved in?
So I think the need for The Last Gift came out, and it's really the brainchild of Davey Smith, my mentor, Sarah Gianella, another mentor of mine, that we had spent all this time and so much research focusing on blood circulation of HIV, and we didn't know a ton about the other parts of the body that harbored HIV or likely, play resident to the reservoir. And so the concept is to take patients who have HIV, are given a diagnosis, a terminal diagnosis from something other than AIDS or HIV, and they consent to a rapid autopsy at the time of death. And so that allows us, in a very well-structured way, to do this autopsy to get tissues from all over the body after somebody has died, but in a very quick way to preserve the nucleic acid sequences and start to answer questions about the HIV in the kidney, the HIV in the brain, the heart. It's been really inspiring, actually, because there's so many people now, other researchers saying, oh my gosh, those tissues would be so valuable for me in my research understanding HIV and cardiomyopathy, or HIV and gut disorders, or other immune phenomena that even might not be related to HIV.
But it didn't start out that way. It was a little more controversial and not as easy to swallow for a lot of these same investigators, yes?
I wasn't too much present at the beginning of the study because I was still a fellow in the hospital, but I understand that, yes, there's always concern ethically about body donation or participating in studies when there's no chance of the research helping the participant, and that's sort of a fundamental ethical issue that we had to deal with. So these people, these participants who consent to donating their bodies are not going to benefit from the research that we perform. It's the community as a whole, and that's what these participants tell us. They're so happy to be able to give back to the HIV community and hopefully push forward progress on research for an HIV cure.
So after they're gone, they have a living legacy that is going to help the entire field.
That's sort of where the idea of last gift came from. It's sort of it's a gift that's given freely, altruistically, for the benefit of the community. And it's an opportunity to participate in research for people who might not otherwise have been able to participate in research because of comorbidities or issues. And it is leaving a legacy. These are tissue samples and answers to questions that will live for much longer than any of us.
Yeah, and I imagine there's not a lot of fellows that are able to say that they fell into some opportunity and an amazing, trial or protocol as that. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. No, it is about looking opportunity square in the eye and trying to grasp it and seeking some things out. I try not to machinate too much about the plan and sort of go after what seems to make the most sense. But one of my little things that I say about being an infectious disease doctor in general is just it's one of these opportunities to truly help in some battlefield. You're on the side of the patient against some outside force or inside force in the case of these infections. HIV is an intruder, and my job is to help the person who has it fight off the intruder, and if we get a cure, it really means eradicate the intruder, or keep it at bay if it's one of these functional cures.
Lock that thing up.
Exactly. So I don't mean to disparage the cardiologist and the rheumatologist, but they're always going to have their diseases, because people are always going to have cardiovascular disease or arthritis. But if I do my job right, I won't need to be here anymore, because I'll truly cure individuals.
And I've heard that for years and years and years, and the truth of the matter is, every HIV doctor I've ever spoken to would like to work themselves out of a job, and the researchers as well. So that's really interesting. And I know as an infectious disease fellow, you have the burden of working clinically as well as doing research, and certainly not everything you see is HIV.
Yeah.
But there are other things that come along with it, and you kind of are almost an adjunct cardiologist and an adjunct endocrinologist, because people with HIV get things that everybody else gets as well. And with the aging population of HIV, that's even more and more prevalent.
In some ways, I think it's a blessing we all welcome that now the issues we're dealing with in our HIV-positive patients aren't their HIV, but all of the other comorbidities that our HIV-negative patients, when I was just an internal medicine doctor, would encounter. So stratifying for cardiovascular disease, modifying risk factors, screening for diabetes, those sorts of things, they all matter. I think there's an added piece that I would sort of, different direction to go into, but in my training background, because of the MD PhD, there's a component where when I'm seeing patients, I'm thinking, is there a question here that we can answer in the lab? And then because I cross both realms, when I'm in the lab, I get to say, is there a part that's pertinent to my patients in what I'm doing every day? And I think that's what we strive for in MD PhD combined training programs, is to take the lab to the patient, but even, I think maybe more importantly, take the patient into the lab in the sense of really seeing in the hospital every day what are the problems that might be most amenable to research questions, might be most easily addressed or most need addressing. And so that's actually an exciting balance between maybe left and right brain that I have to deal with, but
that's cool.
It's very cool.
That's really cool.
And this is the argument that we use for combining the training, the PhD and the MD together, is that there's a part where, when I was a grad student, I had a little bit of medical training that was different from the other grad students. So I was sort of saying, like, wait a minute, does this apply to these diseases, or how can I translate this into something in the clinic? And I think that's only amplified now more that I've had patients, taking care of ICU patients and critical patients, or just clinic patients, and I think about them when I'm designing an experiment in the lab to say, is this going to be applicable, or who will benefit from this, or how can I bring this from the lab back to my patients?
That's interesting that you look at it that way, because I think, not to disparage academic medicine at all or researchers, but so often, the focus is, writing a paper and becoming published, which of course everybody needs in this realm. But when that's the primary goal, sometimes the patient gets forgotten about and lost. So that's really heartening to hear.
I mean, certainly I'm in a privileged position by being a fellow. Somebody else is worrying about my salary at the moment, so that might change in a few years. And, you know, I have often much more time with patients than if I were running a busy clinic. So there's pieces that I can't control for forever here. But I think, again, if I just keep in the back of my mind that my job is to bridge these two worlds, which are easily bridged in many other ways, but I'm also part of that. I need to make sure that I'm paying attention to questions that come up in the hospital that could be addressed in the lab, and then technologies that are coming up in the lab that could help our patients in the hospital. And I really enjoy trying to mix those two.
That's great. So, CROI 2019. Have you been to CROI before?
This is my first CROI. Yeah.
So obviously it's a pretty big conference.
It's
and
big.
Very overwhelming. You can't fit everything in. It's like trying to do Disneyland in 6 hours. What are your thoughts on CROI? What have you seen that you like? What have you seen that you're shocked about? Or like, why did they do that?
So obviously I think exciting news break was the second, we're calling it remission so far, but second potential cure of a patient living with HIV who now appears to be cured. I think it's interesting to also see the discussion of the community, you know, sort of the questioners and people at the podium discussing what do we define as a cure, what's going to be sort of moving forward, the next steps, or how applicable is this science that we're demonstrating with these cases to a larger patient population. So the same sorts of questions I was just talking about, just that how do we take the science and apply it? And so it's exciting to see other people do it. And I think one of the nice things, you can read a paper and see the thought process perhaps, or see the data, but to hear someone formulate a question and hear the answer, if you're paying attention, there's extra thoughts that are being exchanged. I think like the way I think about what just got presented is not the way that the person who's asking a question is necessarily thinking about it. And so I'm learning by understanding their question, if that makes any sense. And so
It does. It does.
That's exciting. It's something you can't get from just reading a paper.
Now, are you finding that being at this conference and seeing the posters, the presentations, meeting people, I'm sure you've met a lot of people that you didn't even know existed, maybe some others that you have kind of had as heroes in your mind, because they're here too.
There's a lot of names that I remember putting in the references to my thesis, and I'm like, oh, that's what you look like in person. That's amazing. I mean, not that they look any strange or anything. It's just fantastic to see in flesh the person who I've cited 100 times in my thesis.
So is it validating for you to be here thinking I've chosen the right path in life?
Definitely. I think the excitement of the exchange of ideas is very energizing to me. The way people are happy to see each other, and the way ideas do get just sort of bounced off of one and then magnified or transformed. You can just see these solutions coming to fruition between people conversing. And so we've had lots of interest in the last gift, and people coming in and saying, could they use our samples, or is there some way to collaborate? And I think it's that extra in-person energy that's really exciting. To get at your point about the breadth of topics, we always joked in medical school that going to medical school is like trying to drink from a fire hose. It's just going to be close to impossible. And that definitely also, I feel that. I sort of have a list of webcasts I want to go back and watch, because fortunately all the talks are saved. But I think sometimes it's that there's a bit of imperceptible just understanding what people don't question and what they do question, and then I can take that, if it's something that others are questioning, I should pay attention to and start to question that. And that's, again, something you can't get from just reading black and white.
I imagine this won't be your last CROI.
I hope not.
Yes, I hope not either. I think lastly, I'd really like to hear from you about what you would tell other younger human beings that are trying, not that you're not young, I'm not trying to insinuate that, but people who are trying to decide what they want to do for a living, what purpose they might have in life, or folks that are, you know, interested in science, in medicine, would you encourage them to go into infectious disease as well? Because there's a shortage of infectious disease doctors.
There is,
And I've heard from some people that they feel, well, you know, infectious disease, you know, it's only about treating HIV, which there's a lot of other infections on this planet. And treating HIV is pretty much just writing a prescription for one pill once a day, and why should I bother?
Yeah, it's tough. I think that there's an active discussion going on in medical communities about, you know, would people encourage their own children to become doctors today because things like reimbursements and salaries and working for the big man hospital, what have you, is more fraught than it used to be. I practice a bit of escapism because of infectious diseases, and that's perhaps what I would say to somebody considering it, is that within infectious diseases, it seems like I am always challenged. I'm intellectually always able to sort of see something that maybe no one else has seen or only a few other people have seen, and that creates a sense of excitement that keeps me wanting to come back in every day. And so in the hospital where we're seeing patients, you know, HIV negative patients, but with critical infections or uncertain infections, or you know, multi-drug resistant bacterial infections, I get back to that sort of metaphor of the battlefield. You know, there is a human being in front of you who is fighting a battle, and my sole job is to be the sort of champion on their side against that invader. And so there's a beautiful sense of sort of human interaction that happens there, that obviously other physicians are participating in that, and nurses and ancillary staff helping care for the patient. But as the ID doctor, I kind of get that extra bit of pride saying, I'm here to help you eradicate or fight or cure this infection, whatever it is. So that's one excitement. There's a little bit, I think when you add research to the mix, you also get to step back further, and it's also there's issues of protected time for research and salary support and things like that that I don't want to wash over, but if you can sort of ignore them for the time being, or figure that they'll work themselves out, there's an excitement to knowing that you might make a discovery that helps millions more than the people you just are able to see in the hospital if your discovery is applicable to some disease that affects, you know, the bulk of humanity or something. So we're here at an HIV conference, but the malaria conference or the tuberculosis conference with billions affected, I mean, those are other infectious diseases where that research has the propensity, the possibility of really helping such a large swath of humanity. And I think that's exciting and can excite anybody who wants to work in that.
I think it's kind of neat that there's some overlap in those things as well.
Yeah.
You know, obviously, tuberculosis, for example, it's the #1 killer of people as far as an infectious disease goes. Also, the #1 killer of people with HIV. And malaria is no slouch either when it comes to that. That's some pretty ugly stuff as well.
And it all comes back to what I sort of mentioned at the beginning of my career search, is the immune system. To me, is how do we find out a way to either make the immune system work better or help the immune system in its work to fight malaria, fight tuberculosis, fight HIV. HIV has been this incredible lens through which we've learned a huge amount about the immune system. We kind of began to understand CD4 function because of HIV, and then all these other immune cells that we were piecing together what happens to them in an HIV infection, and then we realized, well, what their function truly is. And so I think, again, maybe that's just why, like I said, I was interested in the immune system to begin with, and so it's come full circle. I still work on the immune system, but it, to me, is the most interesting part of the body. And if you go into infectious diseases, you get to work with this incredible part of the body to help us, prevail in the world.
I think that's tremendous. That's a really great place to leave it. And I hope maybe, say, 5, 10 years down the road, or however long, you're able to look back at this video and the questions that you posed of, how can we treat this? How can we learn about what can we learn about the immune system? I hope you have some answers for that then.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And thank you so much, Dr.
Thank you.
Rawlings.
Absolutely.